I've stood at the edge of human space 3 times in my life. The first time I was young, a survey officer on a Thosari deep cartography vessel, the kind we sent out in pairs so that if one ship disappeared, the other could carry the silence home. We did not cross the advisory margin on that voyage. We traced it. We measured the distance between what was mapped and what was not, and we recorded the coordinates where our instruments began to return readings that made no sense. Distances that changed when you looked at them. Light seems to arrive from directions it had not originated. We noted these anomalies. We filed our report. We went home. My people were scholars first. We had been scholars for 11,000 years before the Galactic Cartographic Accord was ratified, before the margin lines were drawn, before the first warning was issued in the name of the Joint Council. We had survived longer than most species by learning things before we touched them. By the time the rest of the galaxy had stopped approaching human space and started calling it forbidden, the Thesari Academic Authority had already assembled the largest private archive on human strategic doctrine in the known sectors. We believed, and I want you to understand this, because you need to understand exactly what we believed and why. We believed that the human war pattern was learnable, codifiable, reducible to principle. We had studied the Vethrak Dominion's loss at the inner margin. We had studied the Oresi Communion's relay silence. We had cross-indexed 11 other recorded incursion events, 7 confirmed, 4 disputed, and identified what we called the invariant outcome. Any force that entered advisory space with hostile configuration did not return. We believed we had isolated the variable. Configuration. Intent. We believed that if you entered the margin without hostile configuration, without weapons hot, without the electromagnetic signature of a combat fleet, the invariant would not apply to you. We believed this because we needed to believe it, and because the alternative, that the invariant was not conditional at all, was a conclusion the Thesari Academic Authority was not yet prepared to write down. The delegation was 12 vessels, unarmed survey class, medical transponders broadcasting on all agreed frequencies, the academic seal of the Thesari Grand Convocation displayed on every hull. We sent our best, not our youngest and reckless, not our ambitious and proud. We sent our elders, people who understood what was at stake, people who had spent their careers arguing for careful contact, for observation before engagement, for the slow and patient accumulation of knowledge over the reckless hunger of conquest. We sent the 12 finest scholarly minds my species had produced in a generation, in unarmed ships, every signal of peaceful, academic intent we could broadcast. We sent them to learn. That was 22 years ago. I was not among them. I was at the second border watch post, Station Kethvoran, at the outer marker of the advisory margin, assigned as coordinating observer, the one who would receive their transmissions, log their findings, and relay their data to the archive at home. I watched their 12 ships cross the margin line on my instruments. I watched their transponders register normal for 11 minutes and 40 seconds. And then I watched 11 of the 12 transponders go dark, not gradually, not in sequence the way a relay chain dies. All 11, in the same fractional moment, as if they had been a single light someone had switched off. The 12th transponder continued transmitting. It transmitted for 6 more hours. It did not move. It held position inside the margin, exactly where the other 11 had gone dark. It broadcast on the medical and academic frequencies without interruption. Our instruments showed no damage to the vessel. No collision, no debris. The ship was intact and stationary and broadcasting, and the 11 others were simply gone. At hour 7, the 12th ship began to move, toward deeper human space, back toward the margin line, back toward us. I will tell you what I felt in those hours because I think it matters. I felt hope. I'm not proud of that. I felt hope because one ship was coming back, and I told myself that one ship coming back meant something had worked, that the academic configuration had mattered, that intent had been read, that the invariant had exceptions. I drafted the message to the Grand Convocation 3 times in my head before the ship crossed back over the margin line. I imagined the report. I imagined what the returned scholars would have seen. The ship docked at Kethvoran 6 hours after it crossed back out of the margin. There was one person aboard. Her name was Archivist Solon Vi. She was the most senior of the 12 elders we had sent. She was the one who had argued most carefully, most patiently, over the longest career, position that human doctrine was learnable. She was the one who had designed the delegation's methodology. She had gone in first. She had come back last. She was physically unharmed. I have to say that because it is true, and because what I am about to tell you might make you think otherwise. Physically, she was entirely unharmed. She disembarked without assistance. She accepted water. She sat down across from me in the watchpost receiving chamber, and she looked at me for a long time without speaking. When she finally spoke, she said only this: "They knew we were not a threat. They knew before we crossed the margin. They had known the configuration of every ship in our delegation and the identity of every scholar aboard before we transmitted our first signal. They were not surprised by us. They were not startled by us. They were not uncertain about us." She stopped. I asked her what had happened to the other 11 ships. "The other 11 scholars," she said. "Nothing happened to them. They were shown something. And then they were asked to remain so that I could bring back the account." I asked her what they had been shown. She did not answer that question. She has not answered it in the 22 years since. She speaks, when she speaks at all, only of what she was permitted to carry back, the shape of what she understood, not the content of what she saw. And what she was permitted to carry back was this: the humans do not fight wars the way we fight wars. They do not fight wars the way anyone fights wars. The Vethkrak and the Oresi and the others who crossed the margin and did not return, they were not destroyed in engagement. They were not intercepted and defeated and eliminated. They were studied. Every fleet that entered human space became, in the moment of its entry, a body of data. The humans read them the way we read a star, at a distance, in full, without any need to be read in return. They knew every ship, every configuration, every plan, every contingency before any engagement could begin. And then they made a decision and acted on it, and it was over. The Theshari delegation was the only body of data the humans had ever received that they judged worth returning. Not because we were valued, not because we were spared, because we were, in Solon Vai's words, instructive. We had come to study their doctrine. They permitted one of us to leave so that we could understand, and carry home, and publish in every archive in the known galaxy. The one principle our 11,000 years of scholarship had not been able to derive from the outside. There is no doctrine. There is no codifiable pattern. There is no learnable invariant. There is only the human capacity to know everything about you before you know you have been seen, and their willingness, occasionally, to let you carry that knowledge home as a warning to the next species that believes the less than is learnable. Archivist Solon Vai is still alive. She is 114 years old, and she lives at the edge of whatever we can still call Theshari space, which is not much. She does not speak at conferences. She does not write. When younger scholars, there are not many of us left, ask her what the humans showed the 11 who remained, she looks at them the way someone looks at a question that stopped being interesting a long time ago, and she does not answer. I have stood at the edge of human space 3 times. The second time, I was carrying Solon Vai's initial testimony to the Joint Council at the outer sectors. I did not cross the line. I only looked at it from a distance, the way you look at something you have decided never to understand. Third time was last year. I was alone. I do not know why I went. I held position at the outer marker for 6 hours, watching the place where the instruments return readings that do not make sense. And I thought about the 12 elders we sent and the one we got back, and about what it means to teach a lesson so complete that the student can spend 22 years alive and never speak of what they learned. Then I turned my ship around. The margin is where it has always been. The archive is sealed. We do not send delegations anymore. We were scholars first, we learned.